Yes, well, we have already started here. So, start with video. Hi. So people are
If you are mute, they'll hear. If
okay.
you mute, then it's ni kazi ile pambana nazo lakini amepata zote. Mamake alikuja wanasaidia. Na mamake hata yeye aongei kwa group. Na mtu akando.
Ongei sana.
Let me mute. I can see Nick Nesbitt. I have muted.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
All right. I think we are good to start.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we are good to start. I can see there's a stream of people coming in. So today we are in our second Kepsa webinar to members. continuing with the updates, with the sector updates. And this time round, we are going to cover the sectors that we were not able to cover last week. This is a weekly webinar, and so expect us to go through all the sectors that comprise Kepsa. And then we'll be heading into topical issues in the next webinars that will come in a few more weeks' time. So today I have a distinguished panelists led by our chairman, Nick Nesbitt, who will also cover Carol's remarks. And then we have Mudeu Kasanga, the chair of Kepsa Education Sector Board. We have Georgia Luru. You can see all of them on your screen. And we have Silvanus Sewe chairing the security. We have Faith Kithu, the vice chair of our ESC Sector Board. Ben Roberts, also vice chair of our ICT Sector Board. We intend for this to be maximum 1 hour. We intend for this to be maximum 1 hour. So I will just go straight so that we save time into asking Nick to please jump in and tell us, give us some of the updates of how Kepsa is organized to respond to COVID, and what are some of the policy proposals that we have been able to develop and share with the government that have influenced some of the actions we've seen from the government side. So karibu sana, Nick.
Okay, thank you very much, Victor. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for joining the call. If I can ask that everybody please mute their phones or their laptops and ensure that we can all get through this with minimal disruption. We are, over the next hour, we're going to learn a little bit more about what Kepsa is doing to help during the COVID crisis. And in particular, we're going to go down into the sectors that we just learned about from Victor. We will leave some time for Q&A. By all means, send your chat messages on the platform. And at the end, we will have some time for people, the presenters, to answer specific questions. So with that, let's go right into the next slide. By way of background, as we look at what Kepsa is doing, for those of you who have not been on the call before, on this call before, this is a weekly call during this crisis where Kepsa is going to present what has been happening over the last week, and we'll have specific sectors come in and present as we're going to see today. Those of you who have not been on these calls before, we are working very hard as Kepsa with our different sector leaders to ensure that we can reduce the depression that the economy will go into by as much as possible. Not only do we want to reduce how deep it is, but how wide it is. And a lot of that comes down to exactly what Mutahi Kagwe keeps saying, it's all about you and what you do right now. He says it from a health standpoint. We say it from a business standpoint. The more you can keep your businesses afloat during this time, as difficult as it is, the easier it will be when things get better. So a rallying cry for us is prepare for the rebound. We will get through this. Just make sure that your staff are still motivated as much as possible, and your clients, your own customers, want to continue to doing business with you. And all of that will depend on how well you get through this stage. So we're trying to help. We're trying to help you by all the people who have an interest in pushing the agenda for their sectors. Please engage with Kepsa, send in your messages, come to the calls like this, continue to send emails, WhatsApps, whatever you can, so that we can take your messages forward. The messages that you see that we'll be presenting today are not made up by Kepsa itself, the secretariat where Victor works. It all comes from all of you. So thank you for that. So let's look at this slide. The next few slides that you're going to see are slides that have been generated by our partner through this period, and that's the Boston Consulting Group. BCG has recently opened an office in Nairobi, and they've graciously donated time from some of their very capable consultants to help us condense the messages and put them in a format that people can read. So the point of this slide is really to say that just about all the economies that we're interested in learning about across the developed and developing world are all anticipating a drop in their GDP this year on account of COVID. For Kenya, on the furthest on the right, it's about a 50% drop in our growth rate, which would put us at about 3%. Some people say it won't be as bad. Some people will say it'll be more, but this gives you a view that we're not alone if we are going to have a GDP drop. The way we're working on, I think you have jumped ahead of me, Victor. Okay. So the point of this slide that you're looking at right now, I think I was looking at a different slide, is how Kepsa.
Sorry, Chairman, we can't hear you.
Okay.
We lost you
We have, where did you lose me?
a few seconds ago.
Okay, all right. So the point of this slide is to say that we have just about all of the different sectors covered. We have leaders from private sector in each one of them, and they're very actively engaged in communicating the messages from each of those sectors. On the left-hand side, what's important there is the communication advocacy, which I was just talking about. We built an online platform, which Ben Roberts will refer to in his presentation. We have a 24/7 call center. The number is 1196. Please make a note of that. And that's a call center where people can call in to register issues, ask questions, request perhaps access to particular suppliers, or even propose things that you may have for sale or services you have to offer. And we're very engaged with the committees and the CSs in the government that have to address the business and the economy, and that's the Treasury, Ministry of Finance, Matiangi's team, and then working very closely with trade, agriculture, and health. So we go to the next slide. Okay, this is a slide I mentioned earlier, which is basically to say that all the economies are predicting a drop, and Kenya is looking about a 50% drop in its growth rate. Let's go to the next slide. In this slide, what we are talking about is something that I see, mentioning, which is how we're working with the different arms of government. Let's go to the next one. So again, in a lot of the work we've done, picking up from the previous slide, if you look on the left, we're looking at monetary policy, support for SMEs and support to households. And we have taken a look at what each of the countries are doing and listed what Kenya is doing, and identified with the light blue stars there, potential areas that we could consider intervening in. So from a monetary policy standpoint, we have seen what the banks have done, the central bank has done to support lending and injecting liquidity into the economy. In the next category, the dark green one, support to businesses and SMEs, there's a lot of conversation that we've had with National Treasury, which has led to them engaging with Parliament on 2 days this week. On Tuesday, they presented the supplementary budget and the plans for all pending bills to be paid. Yesterday, Treasury was in Parliament presenting the 2020 tax bill and the let's say commitments that the president made to ensure COVID, and also they presented the other taxes that the government is adding to bridge the gap that the president's incentives are going to open up. So what we've learned from Treasury is that by next week, Treasury will be called back into Parliament to defend what it presented on Tuesday and Wednesday, and we expect approval to whatever degree they approve after that. So these incentives that you see through this page are primarily, just about all of them, are things that have come out of these meetings. Let's go to the next slide. And this continues in terms of what support we're driving to households. I think the big concern that everybody has is what is going to happen to the people who are laid off, or people whose supply chains, their ways of earning income are disrupted. So there is a lot of work going on, sponsored by the COVID-19 fund, the president's fund that you saw him announce 2 weeks ago, about how we can deliver food in packages through the existing retail outlets, how we can deliver it as donations, and even how we can consider how to deliver cash to the people who are vulnerable. A lot of conversations about how to handle rent and mortgages and loans. And you probably might have seen there's a bill that Senator Sankaja wants to push through the Senate, which is going to provide more formalized relief for SMEs who are being challenged by the lack of customers, so they can't pay their rent, for example. That's a ways to go, but the position right now with the banks is everybody go in and have your own one-on-one conversation with your bank, and the banks have been encouraged to be very flexible and supportive. So we have targeted about 5 areas. We just talked about credit facilities, wage reimbursement, government-backed guaranteed loans, direct payments to some SMEs, and subsidies, which we have covered. But these are 5 areas that we think would be very important for us to address. So the work that we are focusing on here is, some of it is customized for, pretty much all of it's customized for Kenya, but some of it is, let's say, borrowed from what we've learned has happened in other countries. So let's move on from this slide. Let's go to the next one, Victor. Okay, so private sector has really stepped up. We really appreciate everything they have done. I'll fly through this. The digital resources and training, we talked about the helpline and the platform. Kenya Association of Manufacturers have also put on their online directory that allows local manufacturers and SMEs to connect. And Kepsa is also looking at linking our platforms with some international platforms, so that SMEs here can find others in other countries who can be customers or even suppliers. So stay tuned for that. We've had a lot of support in the sanitary area, in water and soap, from Bidco, Isuzu, Assembled Bowsers, Tweaker Foods, Coca-Cola, Shofco. They're all working very hard. The food supermarkets and the suppliers, again, Bidco. We're seeing a lot of help from the guys running around on boda bodas and managing them, from Jumia, Uber, Glovo, and so on. And the banks like Standard Chartered Bank, for example, has said that anybody who's in the assembly, manufacture of any health-related, COVID-related health goods, they have a facility of $1 billion in Africa that they are willing to lend. Let's go to the next chart. And on the next chart, you'll see other products and services, sanitizers and masks, education, telecom support, 1inch, Safaricom, and so on, are giving people more bandwidth than they used to. We're seeing in terms of donations to the COVID fund, Mr. Guru, DevKey Group was one of the first ones to contribute to this with 100 million shillings worth of oxygen. And we're seeing support in advertising and other contributions. Slumberland, for example, has donated 100 mattresses. And across the board, we're very encouraged and very thankful for all the support that we're getting from all of the private sector players who are donating. COVID-19, by the way, has a telephone number, has email addresses for people to communicate how they want to contribute, what they want to contribute, and also to propose suggestions and ideas. So with that, let me stop there and move on to the next section, Victor, and let's go through the different sectors. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nick, for a very good highlight. I know there were heavy slides. You probably needed more time but we'll be able to then share this out after we've made some updates after this meeting. So thank you very much. We now want to go to sector updates. We will start with education, and I would like to invite Mudeu Kasanga. Please come on in. I hope you've unmuted, because you could be talking and then you are not unmuted. So please come in, Mudeu. What we want to hear from the different sector leaders in terms of updates, what are they doing in the different sectors to safeguard their businesses and the jobs there? Are there some challenges that you'd like us to know, that interventions for your sector that the government needs to know about?
Okay, I hope I am clear.
Yes,
for us, we are the only sector that's actually been totally shut down. And we've been shut down from the 15th of March. And we were given 1 week to move nearly 5 million students from every corner of this republic to their homes. And that was done with a lot of collaboration from the Matatu sector, especially, and private institutions lent a hand with their vehicles and things like that to allow us to move these students. We did that. So 15 now, today is the 16th, so we've had a full month of closure since then. What immediately became apparent is the loss of revenue. Somebody's got their microphone on. Hello?
Yeah,
Rumbaya, can you please mute?
Hello? Hello, Victor?
Brian, please mute everybody except Mudeu.
Thank you. I hope I'm clear now.
Yes,
so
please.
What became very quickly apparent was the loss of revenues and its immediate impact on employees. And the big crisis now we have is that a good section of the low-cost sector did not manage end of March salaries. And now we are facing near total end of April losses for all our employees. We are talking here of a total number of 500,000 staff, teachers, non-core workers, co-workers, lab technicians, security guards, catering staff, quite a wide range of staff that is going to go possibly without any income. That said, we've seen quite good innovations and parts of the education sector succeeding quite well to continue enabling learning. We've seen quite a good level of adoption of online platforms, and we are very thankful to some of the interventions that Nick has actually mentioned, where we've seen, Safaricom and players lowering the cost of data to enable online learning. That said, the digital divide is real, and we are in talks with our parent ministry to see how we can continue having students engaged in learning, despite the fact that our biggest hindrance is not that the schools don't have the infrastructure to run it, it's the parents don't have the infrastructure to run online learning. This cuts across the entire sector, from high end to the lowest end of schools, to the public schools. So for us, one of the things that we need a support from the government is basically what we are all talking about in Kepsa. Rent is not possible now. Without income, there's no rent. Banks have withdrawn a lot of the facilities that were in place, and I believe this runs across the entire education sector. We've seen overdraft facilities, whatnot, all of them withdrawn. So these are the things that would have helped perhaps soften the blow for employees in April, for end of April, but we simply, that is not accessible right now. For those in technical training space, there's a waiver of NEC fees, the National Examination Council fees. The exams were deferred, and these fees are paid by students directly. So perhaps a waiver is in order once those exams are rescheduled. We may need a tax holiday to stabilize the system. And this is something that we need to come up with a clear proposal as education, what this tax holiday would entail. But at the moment, we are not able to pay any taxes on our school buses. And it's quite a big chunk of income for the government. After the matatu sector, the school bus industry is the next biggest. And so it's quite an impactful, but no levies will be payable at all to the KRA. We want the counties to waive or extend trade licenses due this year. They are not, they say if there's no income, there's simply no way of paying them. And we want a clearer calendar of how the opening, the session, how we shall reopen the schools. This is one thing, and you've seen in the media that a lot of parents are quite concerned about. The bigger issues of transition continue to be bug points, but I believe we can deal with some of these things. For instance, transitioning students from the ones who are in, reducing the overcrowding in public TVET colleges. Once we are through with this, I believe the issues of COVID continue. So some of the way our public institutions are overcrowded, that needs to be looked at, because I think we are all beginning to come to understand the COVID-19 is not going anywhere. It's not going to end. It's going to be amongst us. So how do we limit the spread, even as we resume our work? And finally, we feel that at the moment, our institutions, both public and private, might need some sense of security provided by the Ministry of Interior, because these are public spaces, whether they are privately owned or publicly owned. And we need some clear, some way of managing this without incomes to do it. So that might be one final intervention from the Ministry of Interior that they might want to begin to look at. I think that's my contribution to this. Thank you, Victor.
Thank you very much, Mudeu Kasanga. I want to invite Ben Roberts. Mudeu, you've mentioned a lot of initiatives from the ICT sector supporting education, and I want to line up that with what the ICT sector could be doing. So may I invite Ben? Ben, are you online?
I'm online. So I'm still sharing. Can you unshare the screen?
Hello, you want to share?
Yeah, I want to present, yeah. Can you share the screen? Okay, that's it. Okay, cool. Okay. How is this working? Okay. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. My name is Ben Roberts. So I just wanted perhaps to try and explain what is happening in the ICT sector in terms of the impact. And so,
sorry, Ben, there's a lot of echo. You're not clear.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
Okay. I want to explain what is happening in the sector in terms of the impact and the change. So there's some things that are directly really impacting us as a telco sector.
No, there's still a, sorry, Ben, there's still a problem with the sound.
Is it?
Okay.
Hang on. I can try and dial in on another line. Do you want to do someone else first while I sort itself out?
Maybe we go to the we go for another sector as you log into another line, please.
Yeah. Okay. No problem.
All right. Okay, then let's have energy. George, we have George Aluru online. Do we have George Aluru?
I'm saying Mariam Omar is there.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
Yeah, just go back to the presentation.
There you are.
Okay, just a moment, it's loading on my side. Yeah, so in terms of the energy sector, I think as Nick has largely mentioned, there are some things we're also doing to help out, especially in the production of sanitizers and also for distribution of basic commodities. So we have some activities being done by Vivo together with Kenya Pipeline Company to produce the not-for-sale sanitizers, as well as Current and Centum having distributed certain basic commodities for people just to support the nutrition. On the other aspect is we are continuing the provision of energy, whether it be electricity or petroleum. So mini-grid and off-grid operators are still working and they're really taking all the precautions necessary, but ensuring that we have continued supply of power. Same is the case with the independent power producers who are running their plants and trying to maintain production. And again, we have the same case for construction and maintenance of power lines. There are some projects that are under construction, which are still ongoing. It's unfortunate they were caught up in the this COVID period, but the construction still go on. And I'm sure you've all noticed that the pump stations and fuel is still being supplied regularly. Then we also have a partnership where workers in Mbagathi Health Center are being transported for free courtesy of Kenol Kobil, which is also providing fuel for all the buses that are doing this. I think you can move to the next one, Victor. Victor, move to the next slide.
It's there already.
No. Yeah. Okay, so in terms of the challenges we are facing, these are a long-standing one. The first one is we have these VAT exemptions that are supposed to be issued out to small-scale, mostly solar appliances that are used for people outside the grid. So we still have delays in issuing that, and now it's even it could get worse with now the second point, the Tax Laws Amendment Bill 2020. This bill was supposed to bring in all the interventions, the stimulus interventions that the president had announced, but in the process they've also put in lots of measures which generally roll back all the tax benefits that the people in the sector had. So now we have VAT exemptions that have been removed on power generation. So solar, wind, solar, geothermal, oil and mining equipment, and even inputs for batteries and solar, wind, cook stoves. So they've literally taken out all the VAT exemptions, and now all these things will have an additional 14% cost. Then on top of that, there's also the investment deduction allowance that has now reduced from 150 or 100, depending on where you are, and now it's 50. So all this kind of will increase the cost of electricity. And then they will also really put serious pressure on the viability of certain businesses within the energy sector. And also within that bill, we even have the removal of the 30% rebate on electricity that manufacturers were supposed to enjoy. And it's just a recent thing that had been passed. And now with this bill, it goes away, which means again, your products at the shelf will get more expensive. Then finally, we have these projects that are continuing to be constructed, and there we are facing difficulties in accessing the sites. So maybe just a request that probably we could also include the projects that are under construction as essential services, so that we don't have these hitches in accessing sites to construct power plants that will be very useful at the time we really recover from COVID. That's my input, Victor. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I forgot to ask all the speakers, even when you'll be doing the Q&A, please, could we just see your face? We want to make this as live as possible. So I want to invite back Ben Roberts. Ben, are you ready?
I'm ready. Can you hear me now?
Very well, yes.
Okay. I'm dialing on the line. So if you can, I can share my screen. If you can unshare that. Yeah, thank you. Cool. Okay, so yeah, I'm back. So I just wanted to perhaps talk about exactly what is happening to the telco sector. So there are some things that directly impact us, such as the restricted movements. We need to move around at night, even to maintain base stations and fiber networks and stuff like that. So the restricted movement curfews can be a problem at times. We have, as telcos as well, we've had a big migration and struggle to move many of our staff working from office-based roles to working from home. And some companies such as Safaricom have even moved their call center workers to working from home. So that's been quite a challenge to implement. But we're having delays in imported equipment, which are compounded by flights and other things. But a really big piece of the impact is customers who've got branches closed, hotels, etc. Normally, pay on event basis for some services, ICT services, and then that is impacting us into our business as the customers are struggling to pay when they have their branches closed. But in the main, we're seeing actually a change in the business rather than necessarily an impact. So there's a shift in the demand from network resources, from being office-based to being home-based, a huge demand for online tools such as this Zoom meeting conference that we're using right now. And we're seeing businesses that have been ready for ICT, have been ICT-enabled businesses, really rapidly transforming their business in terms of the, digitizing processes. So, maybe there's a potential upside to the telco ICT sector, but really we're starting to look at, as a whole industry, how do we leverage technology to support the other sectors? And also people are starting to ask the question, is this the new business unusual? Is this going to be a permanent change in the way things are working? I'll go to the next slide, but just some pictures here to illustrate what I'm talking about. On the top left is a graph of some bandwidth being used by an office. You see when they implemented working from home, the bandwidth drops down almost to nothing. There's a few people using VPN services. But at the same time, we see Safaricom announcing that the data traffic is up 40%. So the data has shifted from office-based networks to home-based networks, which then has an impact on the way networks are running. Luckily, everybody is we're all collaborating to make sure that we have capacities in doing that and sorting out any bottlenecks on the network. A very big adoption on online sharing tools. And as mentioned already in education, some of the consumer-facing telecoms operators, Zuku, Airtel, Safaricom, they've increased the amount of bandwidth available in some of their packages, but also zero rating some services such as educational services. But maybe what we're seeing is perhaps, the coronavirus has changed human development. So the speed at which people are adopting technology has accelerated because they're forced to. They're forced to go work from home, and now they've been holding back from using some of these ICT telecoms tools, and now they're using them that way. This is some things that the ICT sector has been doing to support Kepsa. Provided the website and the call center for Kepsa. The telcos have provided the 719 call center for the Ministry of Health and been doing SMS alerting for Ministry of Health. We've also been collecting data using ICT platforms on the business impacts in Kenya and the fact that a lot of people have filled this in across Africa. The e-commerce sector is taking a big shift in the way it's working as well. The minute that people were encouraged to work from home. The e-commerce sector reported that a big shift in people's buying habits. From instead of buying electronics on platforms, e-commerce platforms like Jumia, people are shifting towards buying everyday essential items like groceries. And then this is really showing that the e-commerce companies and ride-hailing companies are becoming an essential service now, with the platforms that they run and the networks of delivery and distribution they have becoming an essential service. And some of them have got together in a consortium called Safe Hands Kenya, which is using some of these e-commerce platforms and systems for distributing essential items, hand sanitizer, soap, and face masks, etc. Digital health is a big thing as well. So there's been a very big underinvestment in ICT and core health systems in Kenya. So in UK, they were able to write letters to 1.5 million people and tell them they were at risk of COVID and stay at home. But we don't even have electronic medical records in many hospitals in Kenya. But there are quite a lot of innovations that are coming up now that can be used. Apps can be used for collecting symptomatic data. But also we're seeing Kenyan tech innovators rising very fast to the challenge. We see here students at Kenyatta University producing the first ventilator, and there are others working on similar projects. We're seeing as well the 3D printing companies, or 3D printing things in maker spaces and innovation workshops, and now making face masks for the protection of healthcare workers. Back to education, that was it was touched on quite a lot, but there's quite a lot that ICT can do to enable education, and we've seen really high demand for online collaboration tools. Unfortunately, there is a problem in what has been done in terms of deploying connectivity to schools. Not enough schools have connectivity. Most private schools have fast internet, but public schools are not. And again, the cost of the learner when they're at home, if they're consuming data bundles to consume data, is also there and is costing a lot. So one thing we've been working on with Microsoft is we've enabled some collaboration tools for some public schools that are already connected, but there's a big journey and hurdle to come. Having got them onto the tools, we're then having to build a lot of capacity in the teachers to be able to use some of these ICT tools. So there's quite a lot of a really fast, a lot of activity's got to happen to harness the power of what's available. Really the important ask to the government and what we're saying is we don't want to flatten this curve of digital evolution. The critical nature of broadband has to be recognized. So telecommunications, the emerging sectors like e-commerce as well, they're now starting to play a critical role in distribution for all sorts of services, and that has to be recognized as well. Leading on to both of those really being allowed to move freely and essential services to maintain broadband networks is essential to national security. Whilst we do have exemptions and we do carry letters and passes, there have been instances of overzealous police people stopping broadband maintenance crews from leaving Mombasa and other such things. So this needs to be kept in check on. We need to streamline the telecoms equipment import processes. We have delays enough with flights being lessened as it is, but there are other administrative processes such as type approvals, which are slowing down the imports of telecommunications equipment. And we might need this in a hurry because, as I say, with this shift in technology, we need to upgrade networks in a hurry. We need to get in cards and things like that. We don't need to spend 3 weeks waiting for type approvals on expansion cards. Again, the reduction of the duties and broadband data subscriptions. Currently, if you're getting any type of broadband data subscription, it's 16% VAT plus a 15% duty on top of that. We'd like to see the 15% duty scrapped, actually, and not reduced to 10% because now broadband and data services are now becoming an essential item and not a luxury item. And really, we'd like to see that scrapped. This is not something that's impacting us as a sector, but it's impacting every single other sector because everybody else is having to use more data and then they're having to pay this duty. So that's really concludes from the ICT sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. We've seen the interrelationship between ICT and several sectors, and I think that is a very, very important presentation and the request you're making on government. So please, we are running slightly behind time. I want to invite our chair of Security Sector Board, Silvanus Sewe. We see private security in all our business establishments. Bwana Sewe, how is life going for you in that sector?
Good afternoon, Victor, and all the panelists who are present and the people who are following this particular conversation. It is important, first of all, to appreciate, as one of the presenter, my colleague Mudeo has said, that education is one of the sector which has been locked. I mean, education is one of the sector which have been locked. To the contrary, security is working 24/7, and it is one of the services which have been listed by Ministry of Interior as essential services. And we have been trying our level best in the sector to make sure that while people are confined in their houses, the security guards are offering the security which is needed, especially at these particular challenging moments, putting into consideration that properties have to be guarded 24/7. And what we have done is, in terms of challenges, we have three, just let me get the slides right. So I'll condense them because of time. One thing that we are facing as a challenge is the issue of retaining our staff. It is important to make sure that I put this one into perspective, putting into consideration that security is one of the most labor-intense services, as we all know at the end of the day. And with the closure of most of the businesses, we have equally been affected, in the sense that you realize that, for example, if you take hotels where you might find where we had a client offering like 20 security guards. By the time the businesses were told to scale down, they also requested the security companies to also make sure that they reduce their staff, to an extent that you might find that within your payroll, you have like 100 security guards who are not doing anything. Putting into consideration that this is a contract-based type of service, when you're only paid when you offer those particular services. So it becomes a very big challenge at the end of the day. But you're basically saying, as we shall see by the time I'll be taking through the mitigations which you're trying to put in place as a sector, we are not yet to release it or to say that it is all done. So one of the challenges that we're facing is the one related with retaining our staff, especially after scaling down of the respective businesses. Then another challenge that we are facing is that the same security guards or the same security personnel are also guarding very critical facilities like quarantine centers, which makes them to be very exposed. We have tried as an industry to make sure that we provide the basic equipments for them, so that just to make sure that they're safe. Name them mask, gloves, and the basic things that we can afford. But what is now coming up is that like one of our members just the other day, actually yesterday, among his 26 guards who were guarding one of the quarantine facilities, one of the guards was confirmed to be positive. So what he was requested by the government is that the remaining 25 must be quarantined. Then he was also told that he must make sure that he puts a replacement on the same. So these ones are also giving us challenges. We are trying to make sure that we provide security to the facilities which we have been entrusted to. But we are simply saying we are working ways, as I tell you. Another challenge that we are facing, and education has really brought it well, is that we are protecting all facilities, be it education and government entities. And you realize that sometimes back, government gave a guidance through Ministry of Treasury that in terms of payment of bills, there were some classifications which were supposed to be paid. Unfortunately, security was not among them. So you realize that you might be guarding some of the government facilities which are running to millions of shillings. And you don't know for how long this pandemic will go. So we are being compelled once again to start looking of ways of how we can retain those particular security guards without exposing our clients, be it government, be it hospital, name it at the end of the day. So that's another challenge that we are facing. Another challenge that we are facing that I would like to share with the colleagues is the issue of the cost of equipment. It's becoming very expensive at the end of the day. We were hoping that with the promise that we were given by Ministry of Health, that the things like gloves, things like masks can be actually availed at a lower cost. It can really help the industry at the end of the day. So you realize that we have that cost of making sure that we equip our guards. At the same time, we have the challenge of making sure that we are paid, especially the major client where we normally have so many guards who are guarding those particular premises. And the new kid of the block is that some of these guards are highly exposed at the end of the day. And we are seeing that we need to make sure that we come up with the questions or measures to make sure that we need. But we are not planning anytime soon unless the situation becomes so worse to engage in redundancy at the end of the day. So we are trying to put all the measures in place. What are we trying to do, which is important for all of us? One, since security is normally at the front line of any emergency, be it terrorism, be it pandemics like COVID, what we have done is that as a sector, we have come up with an agreement between the sector and Ministry of Health, just to make sure that we provide the basic knowledge and skill to the officers who are providing the frontline activities. And we have done a training of trainers, and the first training was done on 4th of April 2020, and we are intending to do another training almost of the same number on Saturday, once we finalize each and everything. Because we have just realized that when things are becoming so tough, among the people who are normally left to make sure that they assure Kenyans of their safety are normally private security guards. So we are also working very closely with Ministry of Health, of course with the blessing of Ministry of Interior. Then another thing that you have done because of the new challenge that you have just mentioned, that our staff or our colleagues are the ones who are manning these quarantine centers, we are coming up with, as a sector, with the COVID risk categorization map, so that we know, so that we get to know that how many of our guards are providing services on high-risk areas, including quarantine centers, and what type of equipment can we make sure that we provide them with, so that at least we minimize the level of the level of exposure at the end of the day. So we'll categorize the risk into three. One of them will be the high risk. We might be targeting hospitals where these quarantine centers are. Then we'll come up with another category, which we'll be calling the medium risk category, where we'll be having suspected cases and equally high traffic personnel where the guards are being exposed at the end of the day. Then the last one will be the low risk category. Here we'll be targeting people who have totally closed down and there's very minimal movement to those particular premises. So it will be very important to all of us. Just to make sure that the sector has the right information so that we make prompt decision. The Security Association has also come up with a command and control center just to coordinate the activities of all security industry players, especially private security industry players. And this one actually was also given a blessing with the Minister of Interior. It is specifically to make sure that we get that particular information so that we can disseminate and tell our members of how to respond in case of in a given situation. Because of the dynamics that we have still under updates, what we have also done, we have embarked on a business continuity plan. Because if you see the way I've mentioned that we are being faced with a scenario where most of the clients are now scaling down, subsequently affecting our staffing levels, and yet we don't know what will come probably after something like what happened in one of the quarantine centers come. We want a mechanism of how we can make sure that we maintain our workforce, and of course, how we'll recover immediately we are past this particular pandemic at the end of the day. What are the requests that you are making from the government? One is that private security regulatory authority, we have a strong feeling that this is not the time to start pushing the private security industry players to the wall. Simply because we are saying with an employment of over around 700,000 guards, if we start becoming so strict into it, and the government is talking about loss of jobs, and you have been in the industry for over 10 years, and it is good that now we have regulations in place. We need to go slow so that at least we can maintain or retain the Kenyans who at least are making a difference in making sure that we are safe. It is public knowledge that insecurity is starting to rise, especially petty crimes in different areas. And these data are available from private security players at the end of the day. And as we all know, the national security organ have been stretched to make sure that they deal with the most important issues of curfews and making sure that you lock the respective towns, leaving these premises to private security guards. So we have a feeling that this is the time to work with the government rather than starting chasing each other. Then immediately we are through with this particular pandemic, we'll be in a position to make sure that we continue with the journey that we started. So our humble appeal is the regulatory authorities should start going slow so that at least we utilize the resources that we have to make our country safe as other stakeholders are playing their role. Then another request that we have is that most of the equipments which are being used by security guards are supposed to be exempted for zero rating, because you're basically saying if a security guard is the one who has been given responsibility to make sure that you check whoever is coming in and out, and one of the recommendations from the health practitioners is that you're supposed to make sure that you maintain social distance. It exposes us to other security issues. So the best thing is to, first of all, request the government if those security equipments can be zero rated so that we don't compromise one critical area for the sake of the other one. It is important to know that military security, health security, economic security, and food security are the ones which are at play as we're speaking at the moment. So as much as we are trying to balance the issue of the health security, we need to make sure that our people are equally safe at the end of the day. So we bring in the issue of military security, with private security just a component of it. Then we are also making a humble request to the governments, being one of the major clients of the private security funds, where we are providing most of the security services, to just list private security services as one of the areas which is supposed to be considered for payment of bills. Because what is happening is you might be having like 200 or 300 guards manning a government facility at the end of the day. Those guards have to be paid at the end of the month. But equally, we're also saying we also need to make sure that we extend the services. So assuming that the pandemic stays for 2 or 3 months at the end of the day, this will be accumulation, and it might also affect the ability of offering some of these services to all potential clients at the end of the day. So we are basically saying we are not giving up. We will work with all the sectors to make sure that our contribution is felt within the society. Thank you so much, Victor.
Thank you so much. I was nearly telling you that you've run over your time, but thanks a lot. I've realized you had a lot of points than we had on the slides. So kindly send those points to us so that we can update this and share with members. Our last panelist from the ESC Sector Board, I'd like to call in Faith.
Hi, Victor, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start with the activities that are currently underway. That should be my slide number 2. We are currently as Kepsa working with the East African business community and the Ministry of East African Community and our partners, because we're trying to reduce the clearance time at the cargo at the border points. This is because, as you may have realized, that most of COVID-19 infections are coming through our borders, and the longer that cargo stays there, the higher the risk for the infection coming into the country. So what we're doing actually is harmonizing the working hours for border clearing agents in all the East African countries, so that if our borders in Namanga are open, then the same are open in Tanzania, meaning that the work is faster, because if Kenya starts earlier and Tanzania is a little bit late, then you find a lot of time is wasted at the border, and therefore increasing the risk that there might be for the infection. We're also working on, and I think it could have happened by now, to include the people working at the border points as essential services people. Therefore, we lift their curfew and they're able to work at all times, so that the cargo can move faster, and then we don't have too many people or lorries hanging out at the border points, thus decreasing the infection. Previously, there was a requirement that all cargo trucks were expected to have police escort coming out of the Namanga border. That has been since lifted, and it's now easier to have more of the trucks coming in, vis-a-vis having to wait for police escorts. We're also working, and this has actually happened, we're working to avoid some discrimination that had come up during the initial rules that were brought in for prevention of the spread of coronavirus. It had been, some law had come up that all truck drivers that were coming from the East African region had to hand over their trucks to a Kenyan driver if the cargo was then now coming into Kenya. But now that has since stopped, because Kepsa, in partnership with Trademark East Africa and the East African business community, came up with thermal guns that are able to take temperatures of the drivers at the borders, and 4 other stops within Kenya. That way, we are able to keep track of the drivers first and foremost, and then obviously, you know, they're able to check the temperatures and to work together with the people in the health industry, health ministry, to make sure that, you know, the spread is contained within the truck drivers. And now I move on to support that we need from the government in the East African community sector. Like most of other industries having spoken today, we expect that the tax exemptions will be fast-tracked and all the VAT refunds and so on, and the pending payments to business people will be expedited, and so that they can get relief and they're able to deal with to mitigate the effects of the COVID. And also we are hoping that the government will take seriously the increase of freight airliners coming into Kenya. Most of you must have heard about the Ethiopian airline permit that got Kenya Air was quite upset. And that, of course, we understand as being Kenyans. But this would, again, ease the transport of goods within the region. And apparently, I understand that there has been an increase of demand for perishable goods in our areas where we export as Kenya. And once we have the increase in air freight, it might just make the farmers right now, who are quite not in a very good place, to be able to then export their fresh produce. So we need the government to kindly look at the air freight and allowing more airliners into the country. We as Kepsa have had pre-COVID priorities, such as the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and the EAC-CT review. We need to expedite that so that now, after COVID is within this COVID pandemic, we are able to give strength to inter-region trade facilitation. We're also looking at giving incentives for local production for essential goods, such as PPEs and on training local jobs. We also want to fast track and enhance the East African Community Framework for e-commerce to ensure the ease and access of essential goods within the region. And this also enables us to be able to facilitate easier access to inputs and intermediate products for industry. Now, when it comes to the tourism industry, there clearly has been a huge decline in the industry because people cannot travel, first and foremost, and people will only travel when they feel safe and when they have disposable income. So for the tourism industry, we are hoping that the government will make additional funds available to assist companies in the tourism and hospitality industry who are now under quite an amount of stress due to all the travel restrictions. And we are hoping that they will also be able to create a fund that will mitigate in the recovery plan for the tourism industry. The people in the tourism industry right now have got nothing going on, unlike other industries that may be able to diversify. For them, the lockdown, I beg your pardon, the fact that there's no travel within Kenya and out of Kenya just locks out everything. So some of the players in the tourism industry have requested that since Parliament is already meeting and with very few members of Parliament because of keeping social distance, there's so many hotels that have conference facilities, and those conference facilities can come in handy as meeting rooms for various committees in Parliament. There's also a request that all trade licenses in that industry should be suspended until 2022 to allow players to recover from this, the effects of the pandemic. Now, when it comes to the overall decline in MSME output, it is a well-known fact that the SMEs make up 79% of informal business people, both within Kenya and in the East African region. Perhaps this would be the time that the government would use to make that sector formal, because if they do come up with an incentive for that sector, then the sector is able to formalize, and then they're able to access either social protection or a grant or a loan to be able to keep them afloat. Because when the MSME players in Kenya suffer, it affects the other players in the region. I beg your pardon. So with those few remarks, I think I've covered.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Faith. Thank you so much, Faith. I think we are just on the 3 o'clock mark, and we have about 15 to 20 minutes to now open it up to people who may have clarifications, people who may have additional points to make, or specific questions. And please kindly identify any of the panelists to whom your question belongs. So I want to open this up. I will now follow the hands that have been raised. Please, as you speak, tell us your name and your organization. Hello, I can't see any hand. Are you able to unmute yourself if you want to speak?
I see there are 4 hands that are up. Maybe Patrick, you came up first.
All right, Patrick.
Okay, Patrick's not speaking. Wambui.
Wambui, unmute yourself. Eric Wabuyabo.
Yeah, good afternoon, Victor.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, fine, fine. Please.
Thank you for the opportunity. I am representing the healthcare sector. I have just one question. I have seen the tourism sector, I think the aviation industry, that is the Emirates, they have started testing patients before they put them on board. So I don't know, with this kind of opportunity, are we anywhere near as a country to see how to test our various, the people who come in the aviation industry? Are we able to try and get near what we are seeing in the Emirates, whereby we are seeing them testing passengers before they come on board.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That is point well taken.
Yes.
And Chairman, is that something you want to respond to?
Yes, I'm not fully aware of everything.
We've lost you, Chairman. I think let's take the next hand. Patrick.
Yes, how are you, team? Eric. How are you, team? Are you able to? Yes.
We are unable to see you.
I want to thank the previous speakers, but I have two questions. I don't know how the situation is, especially on our around 9 cross borders. Because what is emerging from the ground is that, especially within the EAC member countries, it is still difficult to really for the goods, the food supply value chain to enter or cross to other countries. Like a case in point is Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda. How is the situation? Then number two is about the security. I think my brother who was making presentation on security really highlighted the situation on the ground. But I want to observe that I think we need also to put mechanisms as a private sector. I didn't say I'm representing Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, so that the small traders would really be able to understand there is a outbreak of insecurity, especially at night. Most entrepreneurs are crying foul. Their doors and premises are broken into, and you see they're also blaming this on the police. Of course, we can't confirm. How do we really want to harmonize so that there is assurance that their property of the wholesalers, retailers is really assured, the protection is assured going forward as private sector?
Thank you very, very much. Your question is clear.
Thank you.
And I'd like Silvanus Sewe and Faith to respond to that after I take one more hand. Ramazan Akut.
Hi, this is Ramazan from Light Academy. Now we are having issue to project our income for next term because of this pandemic issue. Now, is there any advice from your side to assist us to project for next term? Because we don't know duration, we don't know losers, because we have kindergarten section, primary section, secondary section. We are expecting some losers from these parts. Now, maybe you can assist us.
Thank you so much. Mudeo, I think that is yours. I'll go back to Wamboi, and then we get some feedback on those questions.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
This is Wamboi. I'm a member of EMAC, Event Managers Association of Kenya, and I sit in the advisory board. My main question is, all events companies are now closed down. We employ a very huge number of informal sector, and we absolutely have no way forward on how our employees will now be where to place them. We would like a confirmation from the board and the main committee if you have any committees that are in charge of any arbitration of whatever kind, be it from our landlords. We have warehouses that we have closed down, and I really appreciate the security perspective on assuring us that they will continue to provide security. We have more than 3,000 companies that have closed down for events. All their properties are inside their warehouses, and we continue to rely on security, but sometimes we are unable to pay them. So can we, I don't know what advice or how should we handle this? Because it's a major problem for us now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've had you. I'll come back to you on that. So, Mudeu, there was a question to you. I think there was Sewe. Faith, you probably want to handle the cross-border trade that was, I think it was raised by, was it Patrick? Yes?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, Mudeu, are you still online?
Yes, I am.
All right, please.
Okay. Now, Ramazan, education is going to, as all of it, from basic to all the way to university, we are looking at massive, massive losses. Absolutely massive losses, including layoffs, staff layoffs. Already you've seen online a good number of institutions that are sending home staff on compulsory unpaid leave. Genuinely speaking, we don't have a way to mitigate these facts. This is something happening the world over. So I suggest we talk to our line associations, KAIS, which is the International Schools Association, talk to KPSA as well, so that we can see how best to leverage on digital learning. That's the only way out of this, to just at least hold some semblance of order in the sector. So I look forward to taking on this conversation. We are having a sector board meeting via Zoom on Monday. Let's air these things out there and see what is the best thing we can do. But I need to assure you this, the government has nothing for us. Why? Because in itself, it's having to deal with so many issues. For instance, in the public sector, in basic education, there are all these teachers who are employed by schools. They are not employed by the Teacher Service Commission. That is the big elephant in the room, because there are more teachers privately employed, even by public sector, than there are officially employed by the Teacher Service Commission. It is a huge problem. Let's come together at the sector board meeting, and then we can sort of see what is the best way out of this particular unique area we are in. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Eric Wabuyabo, I think we need to study more of what Emirates is doing, and then we can see how to recommend this. We can have a conversation around that with the travel industry, with the Ministry of Health. So allow us to just take note of your very good point on what we could replicate outside there. There was a question to Faith on cross-border trade within EAC. Patrick, that was your question?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Patrick, do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Yes.
Yeah, yes, the majority of the goods are passing through, but obviously it's not as smooth as it should be expected, because most of the formal traders, the formal ones are better placed to be able to comply with the regulations. And mark you, every country seems to have its own regulations within the East African community. And like I said, that's what we're working to. We're working to harmonize the regulations so it's smooth for the cargo to go through. But the informal traders are struggling, and those are the smaller people are actually struggling with it. So I guess as we go on and we get more organized, then we'll be able to streamline the formalities to be able for people to do business with ease. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I also want to say, Patrick, to add to what Faith has said, we're expecting EAC meetings to continue. There was supposed to be an EAC summit, which was postponed, which we'll have it at a later date. And even for the other sectoral meetings, so that business can continue. Life doesn't stop with COVID, and the issues that affect cross-border trade within EAC can still be discussed, even on platforms such as this. So we have a number of things to deal with as a region, and we are looking for mechanisms to kickstart discussions. So we should be able to transact a lot of discussions around EAC, the cross-border trade challenges. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There was a question from, was it Wamboi? Yeah.
Cyber insecurity.
Yes.
Okay, thanks once again for that particular concern. I hope you're getting me.
Yes.
Yes.
It is true that petty crime is now starting to come back. So your observation is very right. And that's why I started by saying that among the things that the security sector has done is to come up with a command and control center so that we can collect as much information as possible and share with the law enforcement officers at the end of the day. But this one needs a concerted effort so that we support all the security personnel who are working within your vicinity at the end of the day. And we, as I said, we have several challenges which we are also working to make sure that we overcome, but we assure you that we are so much on the ground and we are alive to it, but it needs a collective approach so that we can have those information and share with the Ministry of Interior for subsequent enforcement. But my humble request is this: in your own small way, in your own small level, please let us categorize security as one of the essential services so that at least you can budget for it. So as much as you are looking for other government entities also to make payments, if we pay, it can also push us to the next level at the end of the day. But you'll get the service the way we have promised, and you are in touch, and we'll keep on making sure that we give updates. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Final addition from me on the jobs that are being lost in various sectors. We are looking for a possible framework to cushion businesses, especially SMEs. And this is something that we are still gathering ideas and asking members to give us their ideas, some of the things that we can actually package together for a framework on SME rebound post-COVID. But even in the interim, how can we help cushion small businesses so that they can also safeguard or protect the jobs that they have within their sectors? So thank you for that. It's something that we are taking serious note of, and we are working with the Ministry of Trade and Industry around that framework. We will come back to you with that presentation in the coming webinars. So I want to say that that's all we had time for. I don't see any more hands, but that's all we had time for. Next week, we will look at the other sectors that we've not covered. I saw concern about why have we not covered sports, why have we not covered the creative industry. We can only handle so much in a week. And so last week we handled 7 sectors. This week, which is today, 5. And we hope we can take the remaining one next week, and then we'll go to thematic discussions. So I want to thank you and wish you a very good day. It's been an exciting discussion, and the ideas that you've posted on chat groups, on the group chat, we'll be able to harness and make sense out of them. Have a good day.
Hi, Victor.
Thank you. Thank you, Victor.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.